This was the year that marked the return of David Bowie after an absence of some 3 years. We're going to look at Bowie's musical highlights through the 70s, but it wouldn't be fair to overlook the classic Space Oddity, which was originally a British hit in 1969 and incidentally featured Rick Wakeman on keyboards.
Was that kind of inspired by Kubrick's 2001? Because that was around that period, wasn't it?
Yeah. No, I think it was really the first festerings of my alienation feeling, as in an artistic form, anyway. And it was just an isolationist song set in that kind of hardware, and the hardware of space technology.
2SM's 1270s continues our look at David Bowie. We mentioned an absence of 3 years. It was during this time that David Bowie's famous fascination for Eastern cultures was born when he studied Buddhism. But it was his interest in the art of mime which really re-established him on the stage, with the legendary concept album The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars.
Ah, Ziggy.
Do you remember Zig?
No. Yes, how can I forget?
I mean,
Yes.
At the time, that was amazing. There was you came on with makeup, dyed hair, incredible looking sort of jumpsuits.
Good Lord, did I do that?
Of course you did.
Heavens above.
Was there a lot of planning into that, or?
Oh, of course. I mean, Ziggy was a complete character in his own right. I mean, the whole thing was, he was written, defined. I even had some kind of life story to him in my own mind about, you know, so just like preparing for any character in theatre or film, I suppose. He was a totally prepared, created specimen.
He was a pretty interesting sort of specimen because one side of the album, at least, is, I guess, sort of a Ziggy suite, more or less, isn't it? There's an entire sort of story moving through one entire side of the album.
Yes.
Maybe if you could tell us a little bit about that would be interesting.
Well, I think the listener makes up his own storyline. I mean, I've got so many myself. I've changed his story so many times. I don't think there's one definable story. It's certainly sort of 5 or 6 emotive songs that conjure up some kind of life pattern. I think that's the best way to leave it. And the popularity of Ziggy is that it was full of enough holes for people to read their own objectives into it.
Fair enough.
Which is the kind of art that I like very much, is when the viewer or listener or whatever is allowed to actually sort of participate in the piece.
Well, I guess a lot of people constantly try and work out the words of your songs, which may or may not irritate you. In my case, there's one song which was a case of don't analyse, enjoy, and that was Suffragette City. To me, that's just a great rock and roll, raging song.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not much of a... I can write a small amount of narrative, but I much prefer, and always have done, preferred fragmented imagery, really.
That incredible energy in that song, and there's one line that blows me out every time, which I guess it blows a lot of people out, is the old wham, bam, thank you, man.
Yes, that's an old New Orleans saying.
That's right, New Orleans, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I sort of picked that up and popped it in. It sounded like a nice, pungent kind of line.
Aladdin Sane in 1973, which was an amazing album once again, produced by Ken Scott, who'd produced some of the previous stuff. Now, Ken Scott's a producer of some note. He's done a lot of stuff with Supertramp. How did you get to meet Ken and get to this sort of this combination, working together and producing albums?
Well, our resident sort of studio was Trident Studio in London, and Ken was the house guy there. Sort of a relationship just sort of worked itself out like that. We just happened to be working with each other a lot, and we got on rather well.
Some of the sounds that he's got off the albums have been, superb to say the least. I guess you must look back on Aladdin Sane with a lot of pride, because it's a great rock and roll album. Right?
Well, it's terrifying to me, because it was my first experience of America, really, that sort of brought that album to light. And it was kind of Ziggy Goes to Washington, you know. It was having a look at America from that person's point of view, and it was... I didn't like America very much in those days.
Really? Can you remember the first sort of horrifying impression you had as Ziggy Goes to Washington? What was the thing that really freaked you out first up when you hit the States?
Dollars.
Uh-huh.
I think that'll never leave my mind. It was all dollars. Everything was dollars.
What, just the complete preoccupation with just money and manipulation and the whole sort of crazy scene?
I mean, it really sort of yelled and talked. It was amazing. I'd never seen anything like that in England.
But I guess, you know, you obviously had to go there, and it did help the writing, as reflected in that album, like the Aladdin.
I got to like America very much indeed after that.
The image, here we go with that old image again, but it changed. You had an incredible album cover image there with the lightning flash across the front of the face, and you returned to your natural hair colour from the dyed days of Ziggy. You're back to red hair.
Well, my hair was always red. I don't understand. You said my original colour is mouse.
Ah.
Yes, good old mouse, and red is the only colour I've ever had. I don't think I can recall it ever having been any other colours apart from mouse and red.
You see, the cover of the Ziggy album is misleading because you have sort of gold-coloured hair on that.
Oh, really? That's fantasy.
Okay, I'll take your word for that. The Gene Genie, I read somewhere that was written about Iggy Pop. Is that true or not?
Yes, there's an awful lot of Iggy in that. At the time, he really was a sort of a casualty of the whole Detroit street scene, and he epitomised what happens to an American city kid if things don't work out the American way for him.
Bowie followed Aladdin Sane with Pin-Ups, an album of personal favourites from the 60s, which featured the easy beat standard Friday on My Mind. Then came Diamond Dogs.
1974, as we rush along the David Bowie story here, the year of the Diamond Dogs, and you put everyone through the changes again, and apparently that album, combined with the stage show, was a pretty amazing mix of theatrics and live presentation.
Yes, it was very enjoyable, that whole thing. It started out originally as sort of 1984 meets Metropolis, son of, you know.
Yeah.
And but it sort of came to have its own character in the end. I was very pleased with that whole period. I liked it very much. Very exciting, that was.
It was a really, if you took the message seriously, which I guess some people did, it was a very doom-laden album. That poem called Future Legend was like the end of civilization, if you took it as it was.
I was very pleased with the actual sound quality of that album. It had such a peculiar, obscure kind of... it puts you in a very strange place. And I think of all the work that I've done, that would be the kind of thing I would really enjoy to revert back to at some period.
How did you get that really weird sound on your voice on that Future Legend poem? Did you put your voice through a Leslie or what?
Yes, that was treated. It was a synthesized voice, actually.
Yeah, that it still sounds incredible even now when you put it on. It's quite a weird sound. The Diamond Dogs thing with This Ain't Rock and Roll, This Is Genocide, and the whole thing was very sort of Fritz Lang, picture of a city gone mad.
Absolutely. I must have had a bad morning.
One more song on Diamond Dogs, which is Beware the Savage Jaws of 1984.
I'm not going to postulate on all that. I'll just carry on writing.
Yeah, and I asked you because obviously the song is titled 1984, and at the time you wrote it, I guess you must have been giving a fair bit of thought to that premise.
Yeah, I mean, again, it was my own mental deadline, and so I put it into factual kind of form by, not factual, rather realistic form by making it a year instead of a mental condition. I mean, 1984 is in fact a mental breakdown, but I take those kinds of things and I give them real-life characters and make emotions cities instead of emotions and whatever.
I guess so many people have talked about 1984 that we're kind of talking ourselves into some sort of freak-out when the year finally does arrive, because everyone is so damn sure something is going to happen in 1984.
Yes, I think they'll probably make sure it does. That's the terrifying thing about it.
That just about brings 2SM's 1270s up to date with David Bowie, except for his latest album, Lodger, an album on which Bowie has renewed an old friendship with Brian Eno.
And I mean, that makes it such a delight because everybody in my band, there's such contrasts. And you get somebody like Simon House, who's very sort of quiet and from very London, you know, Hawkwind background. And you get Dennis Davis, who's the ultimate raver from straight out of James Brown band. And you get those two together, you get some really interesting things happen. Extraordinary, because their personalities are completely different. And you get Eno on top of all that, and, you know, everybody else who contributes. Kentucky Idling, you know, it's really quite bizarre. Well, on this one, what we did, we all did, and this produced something really quite interesting. We all switched instruments. Everybody played the instrument they hadn't played before. And what you got was these guys like Carlos Alomar, who's been like a pro and really good and knows his stuff for years and years, suddenly, on rhythm guitar, suddenly he was drumming. And he became like an excited schoolboy who just found rock and roll. You know, everybody, when they pick up the wrong instrument that they haven't played before, Dennis Davis, the drummer, suddenly on bass, you know, and it all comes back to him, what it was originally all about, you know, and you can hear that on this. And this is my, it's sort of it's quite humorous, really. It's my answer to sort of girl songs. It's an ultra-chauvinistic piece called Boys.